The Boys Season 5 Episode 8 is officially out, so let's just get right into it, because today we're talking The Boys Series Finale, Breakdown, and Review. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Alright, getting right into it, the series finale for The Boys Season 5 Episode 8. So there were actually a lot of things that I really liked about this episode, and while I did have some issues, I feel like the good definitely outweighed the bad. So starting out, one of the moments that I really liked was early on when we actually saw Homelander visiting Ryan in that cabin. They have that conversation, and for a moment you think that Ryan might actually go back to Homelander's side. However, instead of doing this, he just stands up to him, and not only does he stand up to Homelander, he quite literally does almost the exact same thing that Soldier Boy did in previous episodes, and that's question the fact that Homelander is a god, and almost mocks him in a way. And in this moment, it definitely would have made sense for Homelander to off Ryan, similarly to how it would have made sense if Homelander did that to Soldier Boy. However, in this moment, he doesn't. Instead, he just leaves. He says one final thing to Ryan before flying off, and this just goes to show you once again that the people that he holds most near and dear to his heart, those being his father and his son, definitely have way more leeway than any other person, because anyone else who even questions or doubts the fact that he is the god has met a pretty horrific fate. However, with both of these two characters, they have openly spoken out against him being God and proclaimed that he is not God, and yet they both still get to live. So I feel like this is just a small way to show that although Homelander is a complete maniac, he does still have some semblance of humanity inside himself. However, it is extremely twisted, and it only exists for his father and his son, because they represent things that he's never had, that he's always wanted out of life. So that's why, in my opinion, he always lets these two live, no matter what they do, whether that's seeming to betray him or coming out and saying he is quite literally a maniac. They are spared every single time. And I just think this is a really interesting dynamic for all of the characters to have. And although Ryan did not get a ton of screen time this season, I feel like the moments he did get were impactful enough, and especially with what's to come later in this episode. But I'll get to that in a little bit, because one of the next moments that I absolutely loved was actually when we see Kimiko use her beam for the first time, and she uses it on Sister Sage. Sister Sage knew she had to provoke Kimiko into using this ability. Only strong emotions could bring this out. At the time, they thought this was only rage that could do this, so Sister Sage pushed all of the right buttons on Kimiko, unleashing that blast. And in this moment, we actually see Sister Sage fully depowered, and she is elated. She is so happy that she no longer has thousands of ideas running through her brain at all times. It must have felt like her brain was going at 100 miles a second every single day for her entire life. And now to see her just a normal person, she is so incredibly happy. And honestly, I feel like this type of ending for her character is probably my favorite that they could have done for her. And it's a great way to end the world's smartest character. My only critique of it is they did try to lean a little bit too heavily in her being extremely stupid. There were certain things that she said that I don't even think a below average intelligence person would have said, like that moment where she was talking about guards, and she was very clearly talking about the British Army. However, that is more of a nitpick from me. So that being said, I don't really have too much of an issue with any of the other moments from her. So all in all, I am a fan of how they decide to end her character, and I think it was actually really fitting. One of the other moments that I really liked was actually Homelander's discussion with the Deep, and the Deep just once again trying to show Homelander, how devoted he is. And in this moment, Homelander just absolutely rips into the Deep. He tells the Deep everything he's ever thought of him, and he tells him that he is nothing more than a pathetic insect to him. And he even goes so far as to call him Kevin, the ultimate disrespect for the Deep. And we also see a couple other moments of Homelander just getting crazier and crazier. O-Father tells him that they need certain people in order to help run America. There are certain billionaires that are so powerful that in order for everything to work, and especially to fund the Church of Homelander, they would need their support for this. And as O-Father and the Deep are discussing something, you just see Homelander fly one of these billionaires up into space, and then comes back down, and when O-Father asks him about it, Homelander quite literally says, well, you said he was an astronaut, so I took him to space. And you can see a little bit of horror on the faces of the Deep and O-Father. However, by this point, they pretty much know that they have made their bed, so they have to lie in it at this point. There is no turning back for them. Some of the other moments that I liked was actually Ashley starting to have a conscience again, or rather starting to actually listen to her conscience, because we know that pretty much from the start, she has had tons of issues with a lot of the things that she's seen and even been a part of. However, in order to ensure her survival, she has just gone along with it or looked the other way. But throughout this episode, we see multiple times her conscience coming to the surface and her deciding to do the right thing, going so far as to actually save the boys when they're infiltrating the White House. She's the reason they got out of that situation. And luckily for her, it wasn't found out that she was betraying anyone. So because of that, she actually got to live and actually got to keep a part of her conscience intact. I say a part because she was definitely privy to a lot of horrible things that were happening, and she was even a major part of those things. However, in the end, she at least can know that she did do the right thing, and she contributed in some way to what would eventually happen. However, before we can get to that, one of the other moments that I really liked was the Deep versus Starlight. They start out with just a fight. However, as this fight goes on, and it does seem to be decently evenly matched, Starlight points out that the Deep is terrified, that Homelander has never respected the Deep, and considering what we heard Homelander say earlier in this episode, we know all this to be true. However, the Deep is just in denial. This is all the Deep has. He doesn't even have the sea anymore. And speaking of that, Starlight then, during this fight, decides to blast the Deep into the ocean. And it's at this moment the Deep is ravaged by sea creatures, to the point where an octopus grabs him, and then he is finally killed. Yes, the Deep, who survived all the way till the finale of the series, is finally killed. And I actually like the moment when Starlight is looking on as this is happening, and she almost looks shocked because to her, he is the Lord of the Seven Seas, so why would they all decide to just murder him? So I just thought that moment was kind of funny, and personally, I feel like this ending for the Deep is probably the best you could have had for the character. He quite literally lost everything. He betrayed anything that had any value to him, and as a result, he was taken out by the things that he claimed to love. So I just feel like all in all, it was a very fitting end to the character. Now, a little bit later in the episode, we finally get the Scorched Earth battle. We get Butcher versus Homelander, with Kimiko thrown in there as well. This fight scene was pretty cool. I know Eric Kripke had said that they weren't going to do any crazy superhero battle. However, in my opinion, I was definitely satisfied with what we got from this battle. Kimiko trying to use her beam, and Homelander basically just trying to ensure that doesn't happen, keeping Butcher and Kimiko off their feet, using all of his powers and abilities to try to get the upper hand. However, as it becomes clear that this is more of a stalemate, Homelander does try to fly away at one point. However, before he can do this, Ryan swoops in like an anime shonen character to save the day, tackles Homelander, and then he and Butcher start to battle against Homelander. And one of the other things that I really liked is that this fight actually started right after Homelander's speech to all of America, proclaiming himself to be the one true God, and him almost threatening everyone that if they're non-believers, they will be taken out. So now, while this battle is going on, everyone is witnessing it. Everyone is witnessing as two people try to go up against this self-proclaimed God. And in my opinion, this fight was pretty cool. And one of the other moments I really liked was actually Kimiko trying to use her beam and realizing she doesn't have enough anger. And it's at this moment we find out that she doesn't have enough anger because she doesn't feel rage for it. All she can feel is sad. All she can feel is the sadness of her loss. And it's at this moment we do get to see a Frenchie Force Ghost, and he talks to her and tells her that it's not just about rage, it's more so about strong emotions, and he knows that she feels strong emotions. Their connection was proof of that. So it's in this moment, as Ryan and Butcher hold down Homelander, Kimiko is able to fire off her blast, and it does actually work. It depowers Homelander, depowers Butcher. Every single soup in that room no longer has powers. And I actually like the moment when Homelander realizes this. He tries to use his lasers and it doesn't work. So after this, he tries to fly away. And after all these attempts fail, Butcher smiling there, just ready for an all-out brawl, was really cool and was really fitting in my opinion. Homelander actually trying to fight against him in the beginning as well was something I really liked. I feel like Homelander, even though he just got his powers taken away, does still have somewhat of a god complex, and he doesn't believe he can fail. However, very quickly he realizes that he stands no match against Butcher, and I like the moment showing that he can't keep up with Butcher, showing that he can't take the damage Butcher can dish out. And that moment of Butcher catching Homelander's fist was just so good. And then Homelander getting knocked back on his ass, and as he's laying there bloody with his hand all messed up, he starts to beg Butcher and tell him that he can have Vought, he can have whatever he wants, and he goes so so far as to say that he'll start to do sexual acts for Butcher just to live. All he wants is to live. And I also like that during these moments, it actually flashes to the camera view, because keep in mind, this is all still being broadcast to the world. So this person who is just proclaiming themselves to be a god, to be the one true savior of the world, is now begging on their knees and pleading to just be spared. And then Butcher finally gets his revenge on Homelander. He says, "This one is for my Becca," and takes that crowbar and shoves it straight through Homelander's head. They actually go a little bit more brutal with it than I thought they were going to, and Butcher actually pries open Homelander's skull, similar to how he does in the comics. And we just see Homelander there with his skull bashed open. Everyone starts to gain consciousness. Ryan and Kimiko notice what happened. We see Hughie and Starlight arrive as well with MM, and they all know that they have officially won the day. And in my opinion, I feel like this ending was probably the most perfect for so many of these characters, and having Homelander in such a weakened state in front of the whole world was absolutely perfect. Say what you want about the writing this season, in my opinion, I think that was the most fitting end for the character. I know a lot of people said it would have been pretty fitting for him to just walk around every day depowered, living life as someone he viewed as beneath him. However, in my opinion, I feel like that would have taken away from Butcher's story, and it would have made for a lot of his motivations to go unanswered in the end. So I feel like him actually getting to land that final blow definitely matters a lot and makes for a really good moment. Now, after this, we see the boys celebrating. They are all happy that they obviously were able to defeat Homelander, but it's in this moment we do get a little flash of Stan Edgar, and he states that he will be returning to Vought, and MM even makes a comment of this, because keep in mind, Stan Edgar did say to MM that after all this is over, he does intend to return to Vought, and lo and behold, there he is, once again trying to start everything up again. So it's at this moment Butcher does decide to utilize the virus. He goes to Vought Tower, he hooks everything up to the sprinkler system, and is about to unleash the virus, not just on Vought Tower, but upon the entire world. But before he can do this, he is confronted by Hughie, and it's at this moment we actually get a battle between Hughie and Butcher. We see some really sentimental moments between the two of them, Butcher remembering his brother, and in some of these moments we do see hesitation from Butcher, and I feel like this was definitely due to the connection he had made to Hughie. He couldn't unleash the virus in that moment. That's what caused the hesitation, and in that hesitation we see Hughie is able to shoot Butcher multiple times, ultimately killing him. And I think the moment that I like most about this was actually Butcher's final moments, and him telling Hughie that he understands why he did it, that Butcher gave Hughie no choice at all. And I feel like this was just a way for Butcher to ensure that Hughie wouldn't feel any guilt over this, because Butcher knows at the end of the day Hughie is a very kind person, and although deep down he would know he had to do what he did, he would still feel a tremendous amount of guilt for doing this because of the close bond that he and Butcher had formed. So in his final moments, trying to give Hughie some type of peace was actually a really good full circle character moment for Butcher, in my opinion. The little funeral scene for Butcher as well was something I really enjoyed. I feel like all of the characters pretty much said and acted exactly how they should have. And then we see all of the boys decide to split up, and most of the pairings were pretty obvious. However, one I wasn't expecting was actually MM and Ryan going off together. And in my opinion, I feel like this is so fitting. I can't believe I didn't think of it. MM is quite literally a father, so him looking after Ryan makes a ton of sense. And personally, I'm happy that MM did get a happy ending. Even if he didn't get his revenge, I feel like him at least getting a happily ever after is a decent enough trade-off, in my opinion. So that's essentially all I enjoyed about this episode. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I did enjoy a ton of moments from this episode. That being said, there were still some moments that I was not a fan of. First and foremost, the lack of Soldier Boy. As we know, his story did come to an end in the last episode. He was put back in that chamber. Now, a lot of people speculated whether or not the boys would try to free him. Maybe they would end up turning Soldier Boy onto their side once again. However, no, unfortunately, that did not happen at all. In fact, he was not in this entire episode at all, and it does just make his appearance in this entire season feel kind of pointless. It feels like it didn't really amount to anything aside from getting Homelander the V1, and you could argue he would have done that without Soldier Boy's help. So maybe it's because Soldier Boy is my favorite character in this series, or maybe it's because it feels like we wasted a lot of time on Soldier Boy in this season for him to not matter in the end. But all in all, that was just something that I really had an issue with. One of the other things that I just thought was kind of weird was Starlight being pregnant. However, she is still also flying off to do hero work. I don't know if that is okay. I don't know if that would do any damage to the baby or not. I just feel like it was slightly weird. However, that is way more of a nitpick than something I actually had an issue with. But that being said, something that I think I had most issue with, aside from the lack of Soldier Boy, was Ryan. Why in the hell did Ryan get depowered? And yes, I know he was hit with Kimiko's beam, something that fries the V right out of their system. However, keep in mind, Ryan is the first and only natural born suit. So him still having powers and holding onto them could have made sense. Them taking them away takes away a lot from his character, in my opinion. Him being the first natural born suit, him now having to live on as the son of Homelander, the son of someone who did so many awful things, and now he has to make his way as a hero in his own right, and he'd be different than everyone else. He wasn't given anything special. He was simply born the way he was born. So to me, I just feel like that's a pretty shitty end to his character. I feel like it takes away from some of the moments we had in the series for his character, him being the prophesied chosen one. I feel like all that gets thrown out as well. So me personally, I would have just rather him be the only one to be able to keep his powers that was in that room. Like I mentioned before, it would have made sense. You could have just explained that the beam only fries the V in your system, but because Ryan was actually a natural born suit, it's coded into his DNA. It could have made enough sense for a comic book show. So the fact that they just decided to take his powers away too was pretty stupid in my opinion. However, overall, it wasn't enough to make me dislike episode. All in all, I think it was a pretty good series finale. I think it wrapped up pretty much everyone's story pretty well. I know some people will complain about the Gen V characters. However, as someone who did not watch Gen V, I personally don't care about that at all, but I can understand how people who invested time into that series definitely could feel a certain type of way for how those characters were handled in this final season of The Boys. But all that being said, I do think this episode was really good. I think it was one of the best episodes of this season. Probably not one of the best of the entire series, but all in all, compared to other series finales, it was pretty enjoyable. Overall, I'd give it an 8 out of 10. I feel like the only negatives were that it was a bit rushed and certain characters were left out of the story. But I'm interested to hear from all of you. What did you think of this final episode? What did you think overall of season 5 of The Boys? And were there any characters that you disliked their final fate in the series? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.